on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about 3 from Hell. And as you guys can tell from the thumbnail and the title, I am once again joined in this video by my boy Obi-Wan Kenobi to do the next film in this trilogy, a trilogy that I didn't even know would become a trilogy, a series of films by Rob Zombie that started with House of a Thousand Corpses, then went on to do The Devil's Rejects, where I think by the end of that movie you would assume that's where the franchise would end, and about 10 years later we would get the next film in the franchise, 3 from Hell, the Firefly trilogy. Here we go. Big thanks to Obi-Wan Kenobi for being in this video with me and being down to do this really weird, disgusting, and vile series with me. But I'm excited that you were into this, and it was cool when we were talking about this movie via our Instagram DMs that he slowly kind of became a fan, and by the end of it he told me that he became a fan of this franchise. And I have to say, for me, this is a franchise that for some reason I have some weird attachment to. It's not very well written, it's not absolutely amazing on a lot of levels, and it's not even top-notch horror for me, but there's something about the characters and the way that Rob Zombie directs these really wacky, over-the-top characters that I just find very entertaining. So once again, we have Bill Moseley as Otis in this film, we have Sheri Moon Zombie as Baby, we have a short appearance in this film by Sid Haig, who plays Captain Spaulding. Of course, for those of you who know, he passed away shortly after the release of this film, and he's only in this film for a very brief moment of time. I'll go ahead and say now, I will get into some spoilers into this. I'll give it a mild spoiler warning. I won't get too crazy. I won't tell you everything that happens, but we are in the 3rd film in this franchise, so I am going to speak a little bit as if you've seen the other films, or at least you know a little bit about them. But yeah, so Sid Haig, and when you see him in this movie, was much older. He was definitely a lot weaker, so they maybe didn't have all the time for him to be in this entire film, or maybe he couldn't film the entire film, so they kind of write him off in the beginning of the film. Pretty early on he ends up getting killed via the death penalty essentially. And in this film, it is called 3 from Hell. We're introduced to a new character played by Richard Brake. He plays the character of Winslow, who turns out to be the half-brother of Baby and Otis in this film, and he fits right in. He definitely fits that over-the-top hillbilly, just nasty, grimy feel that Rob Zombie does so well in his films. And yeah, you know, I like being able to go back and see these characters and see a new movie with these characters. My favorite in all of these has easily been Bill Moseley as Otis. There's just something about that character that's a mix of funny and scary and creepy and just over the top and silly. I just really enjoy what Bill Moseley does with that character, and with each installment he definitely gets better at kind of just leaning into the insanity of that character. I just always loved how he looked in these films, and on overall I just really enjoy the way he portrays this character. And then Sheri Moon Zombie does this really good job of being this just really wacky, over the top, almost Harley Quinn-esque villain that is just really kind of cringy to look at sometimes, but at the same time she's committed so much to the insanity part of her role that she does it really well. And that's something about these films that I enjoy a lot, is that you have these really disgusting and vile characters that are not necessarily likable. They're not really necessarily characters that you're rooting for, but Rob Zombie does such a great job of keeping them interesting enough that you are engaged throughout the course of the film. For me, this film was a bit of a hit or miss. The last half of this movie, without a doubt, was easily the most entertaining for me. The first half felt a little bit kind of all over the place and kind of jumbled, and almost by the end of the film felt kind of useless. It felt like something they could have maybe sped up and kind of did in the first act, and you know, about an hour into the movie is not till it really gets to really good for me. I did enjoy the first half of the movie at parts, but on an overall, it just felt like the first half of the movie was a little bit more forgettable compared to the last half. So once again, Rob Zombie just gives you a very just disgusting and vile and grimy looking film. I don't know what it is, but he's just so good at casting a bunch of actors and just having a film filled with characters that just feel disgusting. Dirty feet, dirty hands, sweaty, gucky, grimy. There's just something about his movies that always have that feel and that vibe. He's really good at it, so I gotta praise him for that, and it definitely works for the horror aesthetic. But yeah, whenever I go back and watch these movies, I always just wonder what the audition process is for his movies, like what it is that he's looking for when he looks for the people he's casting in these films, because he just always just leans into this very over the top, very, like I said, just yucky, grimy, just disgusting kind of feel and vibe to the way the film is shot, the way things look, the way the characters speak, and just everything that's going on. And of course, like I said, with the way the characters speak, when you watch a Rob Zombie movie, you have to expect the Rob Zombie dialogue. There are some lines of dialogue in this film that are funny, and they kind of just lean into the really over-the-top psychotic element of these characters and this kind of story, which I find to be quite enjoyable a lot of times. However, at the same time, there's definitely a fair share of just like, what the hell was that line kind of moments when you watch his movies. And yeah, this film definitely has plenty of that in there. Now, before I give you guys my final thoughts on this movie, let's go ahead and hear what Obi-Wan Kenobi had to say about this. it's Benny One Kenobi, and I'm back with Anthony to finish off the trilogy of the Firefly family. Today we're going to be reviewing Three from Hell, directed by Rob Zombie, written by Rob Zombie, and Bill Moseley returns as Otis, Sheri Moon Zombie returns as Baby, and Sid Haig returns as Captain Spaulding. And he unfortunately passed away not too long after they got done filming this movie. I didn't really watch any other movies that he was in, but he did I looked him up and he did 70 movies, man. He's got a big list of movies that he was in. I think they were mostly all horror movies, and then we get somebody thrown in the mix. Richard Brake, who plays Winslow, the half-brother of Baby and Otis, and he fits right in with the Fireflies. Man, he fits right in. He's very good at playing one of these type of characters that you just are horrible. They're just horrible people. He's very good at playing those kind of characters and stuff. So I found it very interesting that The Devil's Rejects came out back in 2005, and then, man, 14 years later, we get the trilogy completed finally. But it's because Rob Zombie was done with this stuff. He was done with these characters and everything. But he said that for some reason they kept coming back into his mind over the years. So he got together with Bill, Sheri, and Sid, and they rambled it out, and we got a freaking trilogy now. And that's something that I found really interesting, is you can tell that Rob Zombie really cares about these three characters. He does, because I would say out of all of the Rob Zombie movies that I've seen, which are these three and the two Halloween movies that he did, I haven't seen Lords of Salem and I think 31 are the other two that he did. I haven't seen those, but I would say that these three are probably his best written characters and his best characters in any of his movies. And they're horrible people, but and it just shows that he actually cares about these three characters. So I thought that was very interesting. And I also liked that they have the movie take place 10 years later after the events of Devil's Rejects, because it has been 14 years since the last one came out, so our characters aged. And I hate it when movies do not mention the fact that your stars look older and they're still trying to make them be young. I don't like that. So I'm very happy that he had the movie jump ahead, or 10 years. So it just makes more sense that way when movies do that stuff. So and I really enjoyed the first half of the movie. I loved the whole process of them they're in the hospital, because as the end of the Devil's Rejects, they went out with a bang. You thought it was all done. So I love the whole process of that, and then them showing them going through their trial, getting incarcerated, showing them in jail, in prison. I really loved all that, and then showing how they got loose again. The whole first half of the movie was great. I loved it. And then the second half I enjoyed, but I felt like it was a little bit of a rehashing of the Devil's Rejects, but in a different location, obviously. But it didn't dislike the second half of the movie, but I still enjoyed it. And then the one thing I do have to say, dude, I bought all three of the movies, as you know. I told you that. So you turned me on to a franchise, man. But I found it very interesting by the end of watching this trilogy. This is my favorite movie out of the trilogy, by the way. The Three from Hell movie. I think it's the best one out of all three of them for me. But I found it interesting that Rob Zombie created these really horrible characters that do vile, disgusting, inhumane things to people. I found it interesting by this third movie, I was cheering and rooting for them by the end of the movies, and wanting more from them, because they're invincible, I guess, because they're off in the sunset, man. But I found it interesting that he could twist my mind like that and make me care and root about these horrible people, man. I just found that very interesting. So
I just want to say thanks again, Anthony, for having me do this trilogy of movies with you. Looking forward to what we do next, man. And I'm going to send it back to you. And I'll be catching y'all on the tube laters, because we have spoken.
Once again, a huge thanks to Benny Wan for being here in this video. I appreciate you being down to watch this movie, man, and just to watch this whole trilogy. It's not a set of movies that's very easy to get through. These movies are not for everybody. And as I've said in my reviews for the last two, if somebody watches this movie and watches these movies and says, yeah, I just don't like this, I really can't fault them. There are movies plenty of times that I think universally that people can see that are just artistically very well put together, that are incredibly well acted films, that have great writing and, you know, great 3-act structure. And sometimes when people say, oh, I don't like that movie, it's almost like, how could you not like a movie so good, even though every film is subjective. But when I see a movie like this or a trilogy like this, yeah, you're just not always going to be into this. And this is definitely not a set of movies that's for everybody. So if you guys are watching this and you guys just think, God, I just do not connect with this review or connect with these films, I don't really blame you. I think that these are a set of films that are not for everybody. There's characters in here that are gonna make you cringe, that are gonna kind of make you feel uncomfortable. And if you're not into that and you don't really wanna get behind these really, really disgusting characters, you're not really gonna enjoy the film. And that's kind of like what I was just saying. These films do a good job of having really interesting and over-the-top characters. Not necessarily that you're rooting for them, but they're just kind of interesting to watch, see, and play out their events in the film. And yeah, I think Rob Zombie's just really solid when it comes to this kind of stuff in his movies. But yeah, so as far as this film and overall, is it beautifully written? No, I think the first half of the film feels a little bit jumbled. There's a bunch of characters introduced and are killed off by the middle of the film that don't matter. The first half of the movie essentially is Otis has escaped prison. Like I said, Captain Spaulding has now been given the death penalty. That's kind of just their way of writing out Sid Haig. He's broken out by Richard Brake's character. Otis is broken out by his brother, and now they're trying to get Baby out of jail. And so the first half of the movie is Baby in prison, and they're just trying to find a way to get her out. They end up finding this fairly convenient and easy way of getting her out of prison, and after that they end up killing everybody who was involved with that first act of the film, the first 2 acts of the film, and then leading into the last act, or maybe the last half of the second act, they end up escaping to Mexico. And that's where the film I felt was a little bit more fun. Aesthetically, it was a lot cooler. It was very different compared to the other films. There was this, again, this very disgusting and vile vibe to what, you know, Rob Zombie's really good at, and he does a good job of kind of taking that to Mexico and kind of, in a lot of ways, doing some stereotypical things, which some people may not like, but I think he does a good job of kind of building off of the aesthetic of certain things in Mexico, and I enjoyed seeing these characters over there. Again, in the midst of it, you have really over-the-top and not so necessarily great dialogue and some moments that are not necessarily amazing. But I felt like a lot of the violence and a lot of the action in this film was well done. On an overall level, this film leaves everything kind of wide open for another film. Do we need one? Not necessarily. And I talked about it in my review for The Devil's Rejects, that at the very end of The Devil's Rejects, it ends in this very over-the-top and very silly and kind of fun way. Our main characters, including Captain Spaulding, are all driving down the road straight towards a bunch of police officers at a roadblock. They decide to just drive straight towards them while Freebird is playing, and they're just unloading on the cops, and the cops are unloading on them. And the movie opens in this one talking about how they all took like 20-something shots each, and that they shouldn't have survived, and that they did survive. It just felt like kind of a cheap way to kind of bring these characters back for another movie. But it's been essentially 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, since The Devil's Rejects. So watching this, all I could feel was that it kind of felt like a cheap way for Rob Zombie to kind of bring these characters back. I feel like that last movie, The Devil's Rejects, just ended it in a good and kind of just over-the-top way, and bringing it back for this movie, by the end of the movie, though I did enjoy a lot of parts about the movie, and as a trilogy, I just enjoyed these characters being over the top and psychotic and ridiculous, I couldn't help but feel while I was watching the movie like we did not need this movie, and that's just kind of how I overall felt about it. There were some things about it that I felt, because of the times and how much distance we've had since the last film, the cinematography was a little bit better, some of the editing was a little bit better, even though there were some pretty cheesy edits in the film, some cuts that kind of feel like something you would have seen in the 90s. But yeah, on an overall level, did I like this movie? I enjoyed it. I wasn't crazy about it. I wasn't in love with it. I think my favorite of the 3 is still House of a Thousand Corpses. Something about that film just has a much more creepy and eerie vibe when I watch it, and I just enjoy the aesthetic and the overall feel and vibe of that film a little bit more. And when it comes to this film and The Devil's Rejects, I think what they've done really well is kind of just build on these psychotic characters, where you find yourself not necessarily caring or rooting for them, but a little bit more engaged, a little more interested in seeing what they're going to do in these situations. And specifically Otis, like I mentioned, Bill Moseley's character, he does a good job of kind of just being like this psychotic funny guy. I kind of enjoy that over-the-top redneck vibe that Otis brings to his performance. And on overall, there was a lot about the movie I enjoyed, but there's a lot about the movie that I didn't enjoy. And by the end of the film, I just felt like it wasn't necessarily a sequel that we needed after all of these years. It felt like a cheap way to bring these characters back. But I won't lie, there were things about it that I enjoyed. There were some pacing issues and some things that felt kind of unnecessary as the film progressed. I felt like, again, the first half of the film feels kind of unnecessary, or they could have at least shortened that, you know, series of events, to be honest. But yeah, you know, I'm happy to have it in the collection. I enjoy this trilogy on and overall, but I know that this is a series that's not for everybody. And if you are watching this review and think, God, I hate these movies, I don't blame you whatsoever. This is a film that is not for everybody. This is a series that is not for everybody. So I am curious to hear what you guys have to say. So do you like this set of movies? I definitely want to know what you guys have to say. And if so, which is your favorite in the trilogy? Again, a big thanks to Benny Kenobi for being in these videos with me. If they decide to release another one of these one day, I'll definitely ask Benny to come back and do another review with me. So definitely go down to the description box down below where you guys can find the link to his channel. Give him some love. He's got tons of unboxings, giveaways, and reviews going on over at his channel. His channel is continually growing. Super awesome to see your channel continually growing, man. Keep doing what you're doing. And a big thanks to all of you guys for watching. So hit that like button if you guys enjoyed this video. Leave your comments down below. And as usual, you guys can catch me in the next one. Bye-bye.